So, have you ever met someone and you felt like you've known them forever? Or you just met someone and it's the type of person that you just can't help but like? I met one of those people and I want you to meet them. So, come on back and join the conversation. Hi, this is Brian Reynolds. You're listening to the Appraisal Update Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the very fine folks of Appraiser eLearning. I'm glad you're here, and if you haven't heard already, we are actually videotaping these podcasts, so you can actually watch them in action. Don't do that if you're driving your car. I have a regular listener, Tim. Don't try and watch the video while you're driving your car. Just keep listening. Okay. You can come back and watch it another time. And you can do so by jumping over to our YouTube channel. So that's YouTube, and then go to Appraiser eLearning. And you'll see the podcast there, as well as Hal's weekly briefings and then our appraisal report webinar that we do on a regular basis. But I just met someone recently. I was up in Columbus lecturing to a group, and it was an association, the Ohio Association, and what a great association. They just joined the NAA, by the way, as a Board of Governor member, so I'm excited about that. Thank you, Ohio. We welcome you to the Board of Governors of the National Association of Appraisers. We're excited that you've decided to join us, and we expect great things for both you and us as a part of that collaboration. But this gentleman walked up to me and introduced himself, and I've heard a lot about him. I've seen some of the stuff he's done, but this was that face-to-face meeting, you know, and he's just a super good guy. So I'm going to bring him on now, Mr. Jamie Owen. Welcome to the program, Jamie. How are you?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing good. It's great to see you again.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming up that day, and you sat in on my presentation there as well as all the other great speakers. You had to endure me to get to them. Sorry. And then you sat in one of my classes, I think not long ago as well, and sent me a very nice email. And thank you for that, by the way. But let my listeners know who Mr. Jamie Owens is.
I'm a state certified residential appraiser here in the Cleveland area, Cleveland, Ohio. And I've been appraising. I started in 98 in my apprenticeship, and I was licensed in 2000. I upgraded to certified residential in 2007. And I've just been boots on the ground appraiser all this time.
That's great, Jamie. And so you're a practicing appraiser. You're out in the field like the rest of us, right? And I say us because I was telling Jamie right before we went, I just got back from doing a drive-by and doing an inspection with Kelsey, Miss Kelsey, a trainee that we have. And so I'm still a practicing appraiser, but that's what you do day in and day out, right?
Yeah, full-time for all that time.
Great. And what do you specialize in? Mostly mortgage transactions, or do you dabble in some other stuff?
About half of my work is non-lending work, so divorce work, probate, litigation, and then the other half, of course, is mortgage and lending. So it's a pretty good mix.
Yeah, that's exciting. Hey, before we go any further, if somebody, one of my listeners or watchers, viewers, whatever you want to call them at this point, if they're like, "Ooh, that sounds interesting," litigation appraising sounds kind of cool. What would you recommend to them as far as taking steps in that direction?
I think I would talk with an appraiser that's doing that kind of work already, and have a conversation with them and pick up as much information as you possibly can about doing that kind of work. I remember Ann O'Rourke listening to a podcast she was on, and she made such a great point, because she said, you just have to throw everything about lending out the door. It's totally different on every level. And that was so true. I found that to be the case.
Isn't that interesting? It's so funny. I just had an article published in Appraisal Buzz. Thank you, Joan Trice and Appraisal Buzz, for doing that. and I'll be lecturing out at Val Expo. We're doing a USPEP course right before Val Expo, so that's coming up. Gosh, that's next week. I can't believe it. And this may air next week, so it may be the day I'm there. Who knows? But it was interesting. The last time I testified, the attorney said, "Well, what about the 25% and the 15%?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? Can you be a little more specific? I don't understand the question." And you saw that deer in the headlight look. The attorney didn't know what to say. And I just let him hang himself there for a minute. I'm not going to be nice. He's not being nice. Why should I be nice? He had tried to have me discredited immediately. Reynolds didn't say what the definition of market value is. I moved to, remove him and say, "Are you kidding me? All right, let's go. It's time for a fight. Let's go." The thing that you have to do in litigation, you have to remember that these are real human beings and their lives are involved, and this is a big deal for them. So while the attorneys, play cat and mouse, and it really is kind of a game, if you will. You've got to remain professional and civil, because it is a court setting, a professional setting, and these are people's lives that are going to be impacted by maybe your testimony. And that's one reason I like it, because the trier of fact, a judge or jury, is trying to render a decision on what this property is really worth. And I love my job. I love what I do, and I love trying to figure out what the valuation problem is and solve that problem for my clients. And of course, I'm always right. No, I'm just kidding. We all think that we're right or we're credible, but anyway, it was a lot of fun, and that can be rewarding work. Yes.
Yeah, it definitely can. And I enjoy being hired to be the expert instead of just a guy that's pumping out, appraisals. And so it's very rewarding. And you get to meet a lot of nice people.
They value your opinion, don't they?
Exactly.
They really do.
They do. And you're not shackled to, lending requirements. Not that they're bad. Lending, there's reasons why lenders ask for certain things, but you can, you're not shackled by some of those things.
Right. And I could have said, look, that used to be Fannie Mae's guideline, the 15% net and the 25% growth, but Fannie Mae doesn't even have those anymore. No. And that has nothing to do with a court case. So, I could have, and I probably should have done that. That would have made him even look more foolish. So, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that you do, Jamie, because I know you do a blog and a podcast and stuff. So tell my listeners a little bit about what that is, how often it comes out. Just give us a little insight.
So I do. I'm the author of the Cleveland Appraisal blog, and I've been doing that for a number of years now. And right now, I strive to write 2 articles a month. And then I have guest bloggers that have been asking me, if they can write articles. So They kind of fill in the gap, which is cool. And but I try to do 2 a month. I was doing 1 a week for a while, but I'm so busy, to be honest with you. It's hard to put together decent content. For that kind of thing.
It's a commitment, and I, our goal is to try and do a podcast once a week, and we try, we really, really try, but and it was funny when Hal first approached me and said, "Hey, we want you to do a podcast." I said, "Well, I can talk. I mean, obviously that's what I am, a talker." But gosh, when he said do one once a week, I'm like, I'm going to run out of things to talk about at some point. But I haven't ran out of things to talk about. But it's the point you make. It is a time commitment, and it's hard when you're so busy doing other things. And I don't get paid to do a podcast, so you've got to do some things where you actually make money. It's a big commitment, isn't it?
It is. I like to look at it as a hobby, but you cross that threshold where now people are wanting to listen or read your articles. And so that's where the pressure is. You've got to keep it going, and it's tough sometimes.
It can be really tough, yeah.
It can be. I admire you. I've got a podcast too, but it's stalled out. I'm trying to get it back. Home Value Stories is my podcast, and it just takes so much time to produce those. So you're doing fantastic.
So are you still doing those? I mean, I know I've heard some of them, and your content's always great. No matter what you touch, it's just fantastic. So that's one reason I wanted to have you on, so folks could, at least my audience could get to know you, and many of them already know you. So talk about your podcast. What's the name of it again?
Yeah, it's Home Value Stories with Jamie Owen, and I try to focus it on the public more than appraisers. Just to educate the public on what we do and why we do it, so that people understand that we're not just crazy people. There's reasons why we do certain things, but I try to keep it entertaining as well. And I my last recording was let's see, I think it was back in May that I dropped it, I believe, and then I broke my leg. And I was on crutches, and it just stalled me out. So I'm working on getting my next one going here.
Yeah, when Jamie came up, I think you were on one crutch when you were coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you got rid of the crutches now? Are you still?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So the week after we met at the OCAP meeting, I went and got an MRI, and the doctor said my leg was so fractured through, like I was one step away from snapping it in half.
Oh my gosh.
So then I was on crutches for June and July, and I had surgery 3 weeks ago. They put a rod right down the middle of my tibia, and boom, I'm walking.
Oh my gosh. Fabulous.
Yeah, it worked out.
So you had told me a little bit, you had gotten into running, and you were you were going to do a marathon, a half marathon or marathon?
A half marathon.
Half marathon, and that you broke it right before the half marathon, right?
Yeah, a week before. It's funny. In fact, I was going to talk about this on my podcast about the importance of not taking shortcuts, because I got so busy and then I didn't train like I was supposed to. You're supposed to inch up your miles. And then the week before, I'm like, you know what? If I could run 10 miles, I could do 13. And I was doing like 5 or 6 a couple times a week. I got up to 8 miles, and I'm like, man, I'm really sore. And then I walked on that bad boy for a couple more weeks, and I realized, when they took the MRI, they're like, "Oh, buddy, you're in trouble." So,
well, I'm glad you're doing better, and I'm glad that didn't happen to me, because a good friend of mine, Danny Crow, and Danny, if you're listening, hello. He started working out, and he's a bigger guy, and he got really passionate and was going, and he knew that I was used to, and I'm trying to get back at it. I'm doing good. I'm slowly getting back into it. But that was back at a time when I was running all the time, and I've never ran in my life. I studied martial arts most of my life, but I was never a runner. And one time I was at the gym and got on the treadmill, and it was like the weight just fell off of me. I was sweating. I saw the calorie thing that I dispersed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do this. So I just started running all the time. And the first time I did it, Jamie, I got down to 155 pounds. I looked like this pencil, right? I looked like a stick. And I'm like, I don't want to do that again. So I gained weight back, and then I did it again. I got down to about 175 to 183, and that's a good weight for me. So that's where I'm headed this time, the right way. But the second time I did it, I did a little bit of everything. I got back to where I could swim a mile. I was running. I even did a little CrossFit, and those people are crazy. No offense, CrossFit people, but you're crazy. And so I did it kind of the right way, where I didn't look like a stick, right? And I felt healthy. I felt good. So Danny called me, and he said, "Hey man, you've done a couple. You did a triathlon, right?" I said, "I did." And he said, "Let's train for one." I said, "Okay." And we were running all these little races, and I was concerned about him because he went from nothing to running. But luckily he didn't. And I told him the same thing, Jamie. Danny, I love you as a brother. I'm not trying to be mean, but I don't want you to get hurt. You're going to, if you're, And luckily he didn't. He lost 100 pounds.
Wow.
And yeah, he started beating me in these races, which that's a wonderful thing about the racers. It's not, I'm trying to beat you. Now don't get me wrong. When they hit that gun and I take off, and after a mile, the 20-year-olds are walking and I go by them, that does feel good, Jamie. Doesn't that feel good? That does feel good. You can't lie about that. These guys run out of the gate, and then they're walking and you're finishing, right? So, but Danny started training. He did it the right way. He started training for a half marathon. And he was running all the time. And one day he said, Brian, come run with me. I said, I can't keep up with you anymore. And good for him. And that's what it's trying to say. We all encourage one another, right? It's not about beating the other person. It's about beating your own best time, right? Your PR. And so and that's what I love about that community. You're supporting one another, and let's go. And so I said, I can't keep up. He said, Brian, this is the last run before the race. The race is Saturday. This was on a Wednesday. So this is I'm going to run 3 miles. I said, I'll do 3 miles. Let's go. So we got out there, Jamie, and at about 1.5 miles, he's turned around. I said, I feel pretty good. I think I'm going to go. And I kept running. And by the time I looked down at my phone. That was a tracker back then. And I went 5 miles. And I'm like, that means I got to go 5 miles back. And I got back to the house, and I went 10 miles. I've never run that far in my life. And I called Danny, and I said, you're not going to believe this. I just ran 10 miles. And he said what you just said. If you'd run 10, you'd run 13.1. and so I did it. I went to the race on Saturday, and they shot that gun off. It was raining. And they said, if it lightnings, we're going to call the race. We'll pull all the racers in. But as long as it didn't lightning, you're going to run in the rain. And it quit raining, I think, on mile 12. And you're like, at this point, why just quit raining? And I finished, and luckily, fortunately, it's not smart. I don't advise people to do it that way, but I didn't get hurt. But at the end, I was sick as a dog, But yeah, it's a great thing. It's a great community. So I'm scared of this question, Jamie. But I mean, are you going to be able to run again with the rod, or are they advising you not to?
No, they said I could definitely run just like I did before. The only bad thing is now my wife is like, nope, you're not doing marathons anymore. I'll probably do 5-mile runs, but the marathon run.
Well, I tell you, just I got into the little 5Ks. Those are fun, and we did a foam run, we did mud runs, and it's a lot of fun, and you can have fun even in a 5K. So, but that kind of pulls us into appraising a little bit from the perspective of if you use recognized techniques, right? Then that works, and if you're careless and reckless and trying to run a half marathon when you haven't formed a good technique, you run the risk of hurting yourself, right? And that really can kind of come over into the appraisal space. If you're careless and reckless and not using proper form and technique, recognized techniques, then you can hurt the users of appraisal services as well as yourself. So be real careful with that. So back to your podcast, just real quick. Sure. If somebody wants to go and listen, I know you haven't been doing a lot lately, but if somebody want to go back and listen to, the ones historically, where do they find your podcast at?
On Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, pretty much all of the place you can listen.
Wherever the podcasts are. Okay. And then your blog, if somebody wants to, take a look at your blog or subscribe where they get that on a regular basis, how do they do that, Jamie?
If they just go to clevelandappraisalblog.com, and then there's a place where you can sign up, subscribe. I also do a monthly newsletter where I put a lot of the articles in my blog in one place where you can click on them. And I also provide charts, for people, especially local people. I like to know what's going on in the market. So I'll do countywide stats every month. So that's my monthly newsletter. And that will pop up when you come on.
Now, you said a moment ago that your idea behind the podcast was to be more for the general public, not for a particular audience like appraisers, right? It's for everyone, right? What about your blog and your newsletter? Is that also in the same vein where it's open to kind of the public at large, or is that more zoned in on users?
Yeah, it's a little of both. It's a little of both. Some articles I write that I think appraisers would benefit from, but I write it from the vantage point that I'm talking to someone who's not an appraiser. But I think there are some things that appraisers can benefit from, just things that I've experienced and things like that. So yeah, I think I probably have more followers that are appraisers than not. So
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. You never know who's listening or watching or reading, and it makes it fun. And it's worthwhile when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Jamie, I listened to your podcast, and that was all." Oh my God, you did listen to it? I have a listener. So it's kind of that makes the sacrifice worthwhile, doesn't it? When you know somebody is getting something really tangible from your efforts, and you've done a good job. Now, I want to bring this up too, and let me before I do this. Do you know what I'm about to ask you?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm scared.
Don't be scared. I'm gentle, but that's the one thing. I always tell my guests. I had a guest the other day, and they're like, "Is Brian going to send over some talking points or script as to what we're talking about?" And Claire's like, "No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. This is just a conversation, right? And it can really go in. I told you at the beginning, this could go anywhere. So no, but I did want to ask you. So I'm on LinkedIn. I know you're on LinkedIn. I'm not a huge social media guy, but we have a Facebook page, Instagram, and some of my team runs some of that stuff. But on LinkedIn, I've seen. I mean, Jamie, it looks like a TV commercial. I'll see this thing come up, and it's incredible, and then it comes up, and it's you. So tell my listeners a little bit about that. Is this just branding, or are you targeting users or potential clients, or tell us a little bit about I'm calling them commercials. I don't know if that's the appropriate thing, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's basically how I view them, as commercials, or sometimes an infomercial. But yeah, I just like to get out there so people know that I'm out here, especially those that live in Northeast Ohio that are looking for an appraisal for whatever reason. But people all over the country, we're all connected on social media, so a lot of people see them. But it really started when my boys were young, and we loved just making crazy videos with our with the cell phone. But the apps have come so far now that you can really do some pretty amazing things fairly quickly.
Right.
So I just enjoy creating things. I was using Fiverr for some funny videos that you could go on there, and they would custom make them for you. But you've got to be careful. There's a lot of great stuff on Fiverr, but you do have to be careful that there's no copyright infringement.
Right.
So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, one of the apps I use I think it's called Magisto, and it's got some templates, and it makes it look pretty cool.
So just as if some of my listeners, again, maybe somebody's driving the car right now and they couldn't look even if we shared the screen, give them an idea over a couple of examples. What have you done that's been fun, that's went over well with your infomercial, we'll call it?
Let's see. There was one with a cat. He's hooked up to a computer, and the person asks him, where can he find an appraiser? And then the cat little sparks come up, and the cat's thinking comes out on the computer screen, and it says Aspen Appraisal Services. So I got a lot of hits over the years from that one.
Nice.
And then there's some that are a little more professional, where it advertises like my home measuring service, an appraisal service, or my blog, my podcast. So there's a lot of different ones.
Let's talk about that real quick before I let you go. And yeah. I know you're a busy guy, so I thank you for being here. You just mentioned home measurement service.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of appraisers out there feeling a little hit from a slowdown, and probably a little nervous. Maybe they say, well, I'm not like Jamie and do litigation work and estate work and other things. I'm only a mortgage guy or a mortgage female. And the mortgage work has slowed down, and I'm getting a little scared. And, you just mentioned home measurement. Talk about that for a minute and let my listeners know, is there an opportunity for them to make money in the home measurement space?
There is. I don't make a lot of money on it, but it is a good supplement. In between assignments, if you've got some downtime, I have agents that are calling me more regularly, and they just want to know how big their home is so they can list it properly. They usually go by price per square foot, and they want to make sure the square footage is right. It's usually on more odd properties where it's not so straightforward what the square footage is. And it's been good. It's slowly building, but I think you can really market it, and it's a good supplement to what we already do, especially when things get slow. And it's fun. There's not a lot of paperwork involved. You go out, you measure it, you develop a sketch, and you send it to them.
Yeah. I see that as an opportunity. I think appraisers ought to think about not only approaching brokers and real estate agents, but maybe approaching for sale by owners.
Yes.
And that would be an opportunity to knock on some doors or make some phone calls and say, look, one of the biggest lawsuits are misrepresentation of size. And are you sure you have this? You can hire me to measure it for you. And by the way, while I'm at it, if you want my opinion of value, heck, pay a little bit more and I'll do that too. I could do a restricted appraisal report, or I could do an oral. I could do an oral appraisal report. It's still an appraisal. And that's the thing appraisers need to recognize. The appraisal and the appraisal report are two different things. And you could do an appraisal, and then you have options of how you communicate the results. If I think your house is worth $250,000, guess what? It's going to be $250,000 if I call you on the phone and give you an oral report. It's going to be $250,000 if I write you a 1-page or 6-page restricted appraisal report. It's going to be $250,000 if I write you a 40-page comprehensive report or a 600-page comprehensive report. The number's going to be the same.
Yeah, we did all the back work.
So
the intellectual process, we went through that already, just saving time reporting it.
To get the number. That's exactly right. So, Mr. Jamie Owen, thank you so much for cutting a little time out of your busy schedule to join me today. It was a pleasure to meet you face-to-face in Columbus, and I'm tickled to death to have you on the program today. If one of my listeners wants to reach out to you or subscribe to your newsletter or watch your podcast or listen to your podcast or read your blog, what is the best way, the very best way for someone to reach out to you?
Well, they can just go to clevelandappraisalblog.com or they can email me at aspenappraisals@gmail.com. But the best way is just to go to clevelandappraisalblog.com. I do have another website for my appraisal company, which is aspenappraisalservices.com. Yeah, that's right. AspenAppraisalServices.com. But Cleveland Appraisal Blog is a lot easier to remember. So you can get me there.
and I'm sure if they Google you, they can find you all over the place anyway. So,
Yeah, there's no going back now. I'm out there.
Well, thanks again very much for being here. I appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Appraisal Update podcast, brought to you as always by the very fine folks of Appraiser eLearning. If you would like to be a guest on the program, or you know someone that would be a fantastic guest like Jamie, give us a call. Let us know. We'll be happy to put you on the program. Until next time, stay busy, make some money, take a little vacation, take a breath, take a vacation. I just got back from about 3 or 4 days. I worked a little bit, but mostly I enjoyed myself. Looked at the ocean from sitting in the pool with an adult beverage and relaxed some. So take advantage of the slow time because it's going to get busy again, I promise. Until next time, I'm your host, Brian Reynolds for Jamie Owen. Happy appraising.
The Appraisal Update podcast is brought to you by Appraiser eLearning.